Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to be here. Of course, we don't really know where here is, do we? Here is wherever you are and wherever I am. So, welcome. I like Gilbert would do, I'll say the four vows. Um, I vow to deliver innumerable sentient beings. I vow to cut off endless vexations. I vow to master limitless approaches to Dharma. I vow to attain supreme Buddhahood. Okay, so thank you all. So we're in for a very interesting um, exposure to ancient Chinese poetry, modern Western poetry, and some technical terms that may help us sort out what we're experiencing. So I'm just going to give a very quick overview of the whole talk. It's believe it or not, divided into 7 parts. I start with talking about the uses of poetry in studying Chan. And I talk about Han Shan De Qing. And then I'm going to introduce these terms, familiarization and defamiliarization. Not so dissimilar from reifying and de-reifying. And what I'm trying to do here is to bring attention to the pitfalls of grasping and the pitfalls of letting go. And kind of an introduction to that is how Dongshang Liangjie was asked by his monk about seeing his original face. And Dongshan had taught the bird path, which is no path at all. So the monk asked Dongshan, so if I want to see my original face, do I follow the bird path? And Dongshan said no. So no solution, right? No moving forward, no moving back, no staying the same. And we'll see this in the poem later on when they talk about the spiritual source, which could be Buddha nature among many other things, that it can't be approached and it can't be gotten away from. And then I'm going to talk about the use of language, and I'm going to hone in on just the word song, because this is the song of the thatched hut. And I'll show various examples of how dynamic this term can be. Then I talk about the poem itself, which is extensive and deep. And then a little bit of a link to the Lankavatara to continue this theme of familiarization, defamiliarization, what we're attaching to, what we're not attaching to. Then a very short poem by Yu Dafu, where we can see how people might look at the same thing in very different ways. And finally, a Western poem, like with a lot of emotional impact. So that's, you just heard the whole talk. You can all just sign off now. No, so, all right. So, and also just one background. Some of you may know, I worked at the Rubin Museum in New York City, which was a museum of Himalayan and Buddhist art, which very unfortunately closed over a month ago. Before it closed, we were asked to present something that we really liked. And I had translated this poem 10 years ago. I looked at it again, have tweaked the translation many times. I'm not finished. And a staff member did the PowerPoint for me. And then as of 2 weeks ago, I started using PowerPoint. So if there are ugly slides, I probably did them. Okay, so let me bring this up. And okay. So is this good, Sentha?
You're sharing the presenter view. So if you could go back and share the slideshow itself.
Oh, okay.
So you can stop sharing and try sharing again.
Okay. Oh, it won't, did this work or no? Or I just,
No.
all right.
This is your view.
That's my view. Sorry, stop share. Oh boy. I have to figure out which one it is.
So
Right.
just share and go window. Select the window that you want to share.
Right. Well, the one that I wanted the one that has the notes in it. I think that was the one. Um, all right. Give me a chance. I've never done this before, so that's why it's so interesting. Um, so you say, all right, so this one, is that, are you
No,
seeing?
no. We are seeing your
Oh,
view.
I can, yes, I can see that. All right, now I know, I get it. All right, so let me try it again. And so I know not to use that. Let's try this. All right, this is good.
Yes. Now it's
And now,
fine.
and now I can right click and where it says hide presenter view, which is not what I want.
You could hide it and show it again. It'll come up.
All right, so in other words, it's here. I just don't see it in this slide. Is that
Yeah, or you could do Windows key and tab.
window key and tab? Um, that's not good, right?
Are you seeing the presenter view now? You are seeing it?
Well, sort of.
Yeah, then we are good. We are seeing your
You're
slide.
good. You're good. Okay. All right. All right. That's good. That's good. Okay. There it is. There is my mandala on the left, and Song of the Thatched Hut by Shitou Xiqian. And I have a subtitle to the talk, which is Communicating What Cannot Be Communicated. And that's kind of the eternal joy of the practice and somewhat of the frustration, because what ultimately is communicated is something that doesn't have to be communicated, which is who we actually are. So I'm first going into, let's see, there we go. So Han Shan De Qing, as you can see, Ming Dynasty, 16th and 17th century, came to my rescue. When
Harry, did you advance the slide? I'm sorry. There should be an arrow at the bottom in your presenter view.
an arrow.
Or yeah, if you click on
So did, um, so what are you seeing now?
we are seeing the title slide.
Oh, you're still seeing the title slide.
Yeah.
Oh, that's interesting. Um,
So if you go to the presenter view,
yes.
you will see on the left there's a current slide, and then there's some arrow at the bottom of that.
All right. My mouse has disappeared. Oh, there we go. Okay. It comes and it goes. Maybe it's because I'm in a share view. So if I tab to another thing, sorry for the technical difficulties, everyone. You're still seeing the same thing, right?
We're still seeing the title slide.
And now?
Still the title one.
Oh, okay, but now did this go
There,
to?
yes, that's it.
Okay, all right, great. So Han Shan De Qing, so he said poetry is Chan, right? That was because he was a great poet, and he had a method for switching dreams, the real world, and seeing the absurdity of both. So he would use a poem, make believe the poem was real, and what he was actually experiencing was not real. And there's a long passage of his explanation of a realization doing this. And then he responded to people who objected to his method and his views of poetry. And so he wrote that people think that Chan is a way of transcending sentiment, but the world, the Buddha, and all the patriarchs were also yesterday's dreams, as were samsara and nirvana. So he's wiping out any kind of preconceptions that we might have about the world, and using poetry, using the words which we're usually trying to transcend, as we're usually trying to transcend emotion and our delusions, but those are the things that we practice with. And that's what I'm going to work on also in this presentation. So I'm introducing him, and this is a poem I think many in the group have seen before, at least the last part of it, that Han Shan De Qing wrote, which combines absolute and relative, death and birth, day and night, water flowing, flowers withering. That's the swirl of of existence, non-dual existence. But within that, he has found the anchor of his Buddha nature. There are many ways of interpreting this. And what's happening is something very familiar, which is your nostrils, now are appearing differently to him. And so I'm going to riff on that theme, if you will. So this is an introduction. So now we go to familiarization and defamiliarization. In Tibetan, one of the words for meditation is familiarization. And this doesn't mean familiarizing in a conceptual way, taking notes and trying to categorize things. This is the familiarization of true mind, of the awareness that doesn't belong to anyone. This is really a state of silent illumination. That's really what Gampa is about. But we who live in the secular world, in samsara, we're still caught up in our delusions and our attachments, and we're often blind to them. So a literary critic named Victor Shkavskov and another American named Matthew Zabruder came up with these terms. These are literary terms, but I'm sort of turning them around, about defamiliarizing, strangifying what we ordinarily perceive in our everyday world. And that happened with De Ching, where we walk around with our noses all the time. We never give it a second thought. And by just that simple connection to how we breathe, which is quite important, he's looking at everything in a brand new way. It's one way of looking at it. So now I'm going to give some examples of what I mean by familiarization and defamiliarization. Here is a very short poem by William Carlos Williams. It's called The Red Wheelbarrow. And as you'll see, when I use these terms, defamiliarization, familiarization, there's a certain point when they'll blur in your mind, right? It's hard to say which is which. So I'm going to read the poem. So much depends upon a red wheelbarrow glazed with rainwater beside the white chickens. So Buddhism does not have a monopoly on praticca samutpada, of causes and conditions. The whole world is transpiring through causes and conditions. And this poem, which you could use, it wouldn't be the world's greatest Watto, but it's got this panoramic view narrowed in on one object, because it's talking about how much depends on it. And you could speak about this for quite a long time. Once, years ago, I was with Shitou, Master Sheng Yen, and we had gone to this really beautiful arboretum called Planting Fields in Long Island. Shitou was standing in front of the group, and he picked up a single leaf. And he said, an enlightened person could speak about this leaf for 100 years. So that already, of course, blew me away as I tried to take that in. And then he said, I could speak about it right now for 3 days straight. Do you want to hear me? Now, it was getting late in the day. No one took him up on that. Just to show how a very simple thing, looking at something which everyone knows, but then looking beyond it, if you will. And we'll see in a poem that's coming up, this beyond and near kind of played with. So now here's defamiliarization in the Dharma. This is from Lankavatara Sutra, chapter 3. And I'll just read a few parts of it. This goes on for 2 pages, but I think everyone will get the point. A statement about birth is about no birth. Statement about permanence is about no permanence. And going down here, a statement about skill is about no skill. Statement about purity is about no purity. A statement about the sky is about no sky. Statement about clouds is about no clouds. And finally, a statement about words is about no words. So anything that we think we know about, that we can hold on to, this sutra is showing us it's not what we think. there's something beyond, there's something outside of our understanding. And that's one take of defamiliarization. Now I'm going to talk about song, right? Because it is the song of the thatched hut. And I have the character up here, and actual etymology, the etymology of the graph that is g for song, all of the components are about breath. And that's really what a song is. It's about breath. But the Latin for breath is spiritus. So it's not just a physical breath, but it's this spiritual breath. And like Zarko said, the breath is the subtlest part of the body that we can experience and the grossest part of the mind. So most of us, if we talk about the word song, we wouldn't go running to a dictionary to find out what it means. But I'm going to show how song can really have a dimensionality way beyond what you normally perceive. So now I'm going to some poetry by Walt Whitman. And this is called Song of Myself. I'm going to read the selected parts, right, because I want to move through the presentation. But number one, I celebrate myself and sing myself, and what I assume you shall assume. For every atom belonging to me as good belongs to you. So it might sound like an ego trip at first, but then he's equating himself with everyone else in the world. In the second selection, he talks about his delight in being along the fields and hillsides, his health, the full noon trill, and the song of me rising from bed and meeting the sun. So it's kind of his experience out in the world. And then in the third, he talks about moving to various places, not a person or object missing, absorbing all to myself for this song. So the song is overflowing, if you will. And then in this next one, which is longer, he talks about all sorts of different people, from sons and grandsons and hunters and trappers, the living and the dead, old husbands, young husbands, right? And he says, moving down towards the end, and these tend inward to me, and I tend outward to them. As such, it is to be of these more or less I am. I love the more or less, right? No fixed entities here. And of these, one and all, I weave the song of myself. And the last two, now I will do nothing but listen, to accrue what I hear into the song, to let sounds contribute to it. So listen is very important. There is no such thing as a song that hasn't been preceded by listening, by absorbing the information, the emotion, whatever it is that one wants to express. And then finally, not words or routine, this song of mine, but apts abruptly to question, to leap beyond, yet nearer bring. That line could be in a Buddhist text, leap beyond, yet nearer bring. Once again, the normal parameters, the way that we usually measure things. In another poem by Shitou, he says there is no near or far. So once again, here's a song just bursting at the seams, if you will. Now here's another poem from William Butler Yeats. It's called A Coat, but he says, I made my song a coat covered with embroideries out of old mythologies, from heel to throat. But the fools caught it, wore it in the world's eyes as though they'd wrought it. Song, let them take it, for there's more enterprise in walking naked. So in this talk, I'm taking a lot of liberties. One thing, you could play around with this song as being Buddha nature. Not really. Yeats wasn't a Buddhist, but the song seems to be his artistic vision, some real semblance of who he really is. And he succumbed to samsaric forces, if you will. Maybe he had to pander to some people who were patronizing his poetry. And once again, he disguised himself, embroidered himself with old mythologies to impress people. But then people took his ideas, his true being, and they wore it in the world's eyes. They didn't really understand where he was coming from. And once again, and they stole it in a way, as though they'd wrought it. And then he says, "Song, let them take it, for there's more enterprise in walking naked." So once again, being who you really are without artifice, without, at a certain point, of course, in our practice, without needs and desires, being a true person, or an original person. Once again, I'm using Western poetry. It's not exactly accurate in a dharmic sense, but I think it points in very interesting directions. And so now, and then I just wanted to throw this in just to Gate Gate Parasam Gate Bodhisvaha. Is a mantra a song? I don't know. Do we really know what a mantra is? You know, Shifu in his book, There Is No Suffering, says the whole sutra is a mantra. And when Shifu was sick, Jimmy Yu passed around the Medicine Buddha Sutra, and there was a note that said that if I were to explain every part of this mantra, which is, you know, fairly short, few lines, said I couldn't do it within a kalpa. So I'm just pointing once again how everyone knows a mantra, of course, in Sanskrit means to protect the mind, but we can sort of unhinge ourselves. It's not the best choice of words. We can detach from our accustomed understanding of things and open ourselves up. And so now we're about to get into the poem. I like to say that that's my my high school graduation picture, but that's not true. That's actually Shantara Shita, who was the pundit who invited Padmasambhava into Tibet, you know, and called the second Buddha. And of course, as I said, someone from the Rubin, which is a museum of Tibetan art, did this for me. So that's what you're seeing. So now we begin. Song of the Thatched Hut. So the first line, something you wouldn't notice if you were reading this in English. You know, I've translated it, I've fastened. Well, it just so happens there actually is an I in Chinese. Very unusual in a poem like this to actually see whatever the I could mean, physical, mental, attachment. And this poem will go beyond transcendence and beyond immanence, beyond relative and beyond absolute. So, interestingly enough, the second character, Je, means to tie up. It means to be in bondage, to be restrained. And if those two characters were just there, and once again, I'm taking some liberties with Chinese as well, it would mean I'm bound up. But he's not bound up. He's taking his vexations, whatever, and pouring that into the grass hut. And the grass hut is going to be kind of unknowable by the end of the poem. And one of the things that we can bring to our encounter with this is something that Robert Thurman talked about, which is tolerance of the inconceivable. This is where our faith can come in. We can see these things that are really beyond conceptual understanding, but we can absorb what we can, and we can see what we can see. So here we are. He's tied this grass hut up, and then it says, no worldly treasures here. In Wumen Guan, it talks about getting into the gate, the gateless gate, and it says that no worldly treasure can come through the the gateless gate, the gate being the gate of liberation, if you will, because things that are conditioned will decay. So Shitou is saying there's nothing like that. And even if some joker came along and put a pot of gold into his hut, there'd still be no worldly treasures there because there would be no attachment to it. My interpretation. So then, having eaten at ease, I will sleep contented. This really harkens to the very famous Watteau of Zhaozhou being approached by a monk who wants to join his monastery. Zhaozhou asks the monk, "Have you eaten your porridge?" The monk says, "Yes." Zhaozhou says, "Then go wash your bowls." There, of course, is an understanding of this as being the perfect simplicity of cause and condition, one thing following after another. One does what one has to do in the moment. But there's another interpretation of that, of having eaten, meaning to have gotten some teaching. And in the case of the monk who's approaching Zhaozhou, he's learned from some other teacher, and Zhaozhou is telling him to wash your bowls, clear your mind, open your mind for new teachings. But here, Shitou has finished his training, if you will. And like it says in the formless poem in the Platform Sutra, when you have gone beyond love and hate, then you can stretch out your legs and relax. So he's not just taking a siesta, and this is not a sleep of delusion. This is a sleep of clarity. So when first built, the thatch seemed new. I spoke to Guo Xingfa Shi about this line, the Cheng Shi, and that can also mean the completion of practice, at the time of completion. Now, this could be a beginning realization because he's looking at things in a particular way. It's literally in the beginning, saw the thatch, right, was new. And perhaps, initially after a realization, that might be how you feel. You sort of have a sense that you really have this understanding. Things are in a certain way. But impermanence, it started to come apart. And so what adding more thatch means is that practice is continuous. Nothing will stop his practice. He is really one with whatever he is doing. So the one abiding in the hut always remains calm and present. So there's some very interesting things that go on in the Chinese. So now it's not an I anymore, just person, just, people, right? And I think it's important when you look at a poem like this to understand it's not about something that happened 1,200 years ago, maybe 10,000 miles away from us. This is what's happening right now in our lives, or if we were able to see it. So he's abiding in the hut. I mean, in whatever situation he is perfectly there, calm always, and there's the character means like staying right there. His mind is unmoving, we could say. And then it says, not attached, neither within, without, or in between. So there's kind of a cinematic aspect to this poem. You'll see right now we're sort of with him in the hut, but the inness, the outness, the in-betweenness is indiscernible, if you will. Also, The second character, where it says Bushu, that character also means to categorize. So he's not depending on concepts, on categories, on putting things in their niche. He's really beyond that. And where the worldly dwell, I do not. Now we have to ask, what does he mean by the worldly? And actually, we'll get a sense of perhaps what that might mean in another line or two. But right now, it's people who are not practicing, who are not engaged in the same path or non-path that Shitou is in. And they have particular concerns, particular ways of encountering the world, which are not his. You know, I sometimes translate this character right here, Zhu. It means to dwell. It's also, if you remember in the Diamond Sutra, develop a mind that is nowhere supported. That's the same character. I sometimes like to translate it as identify with. Once again, not perfect, not entirely correct, but at least starts to give you a hint of what dwelling might be, that you're really identifying, associating yourself with not just your surroundings, but the concerns of your life, the concerns of other people's lives as you're perceiving them, or in many cases, as you're misperceiving them. It's not like Shitou couldn't be standing next to a villager and talk to them, but he's not susceptible at this point to a lot of the five desires of like food and sex and fame and wealth and sleep. And so what the worldly crave, I do not. Interesting, the third character and the last character, I, is the word for crave, but it's also the character that's on the eighth link of the chain of dependent origination. So not only is he left desires, if you will, but there is a sense, which I could be reading into it, that he's also broken out of the chain of samsara. But he's a bodhisattva. He's not about to leave the world, but he's no longer vexed in the way that he had been by his cravings. So now the poem starts to get cosmic, celestial, if you will. So we have this word for small, right? It says literally, hut although small, and then contains, holds, encompasses Dharma realms, meaning all Dharma realms. And that's physical, mental, true dharmas. A dharma defined by the Lankavatara Sutra is anything that you can imagine. A non-dharma is a dharma that wasn't produced by causes and conditions, like a flying hippopotamus, I'd say, would be a non-dharma. Now, in these venerable quarters, this old man penetrates relative and absolute. Taigen Dan Leighton translated this line, in 10 square feet, this old man understands forms and their nature. And I'm still not entirely sure. It's also, let me talk about this, the venerable quarters. That gave me a fair amount of trouble, because it is literally 10 feet, but it's also an epithet for the abbot. And that's why I use the word venerable. And I'm just going to go to another slide to show what I mean. Here's a typical tanka that usually has 3 parts. The upper register of tankas have the lineage originators, the lineage holders. And this, once again, is Shanta Rakshita. It doesn't matter. And then the Dharma protectors are often below. But the idea is that the painting and the poem, going back to that, is showing this unbroken lineage that he is practicing within, which is really beyond space and time. As we can see, if the hut is encompassing all Dharma realms, not even the person at the moment has disappeared. And he's using his attainment is such that he is not caught in any kind of conceptual trap. He's gone beyond understanding, actually, and is in with embodiment. Many ways, when we stop, I'm curious to see if anyone has any ideas about this, but let's continue. So go to the next one. Bodhisattvas of the Supreme Vehicle do not doubt. In this particular case, I'm not entirely sure that it's just Mahayana as a sect distinct from Shravakas and Pratyeka Buddhas, although of course that sense is really here. But it's also emphasizing the bodhisattva nature, and that the faith is not sullied, not broken. And that's a deep faith in practice, as it says in the poem, Faith in Mind. In non-duality, faith and mind are one in the same. So it's not like he's not entertaining some questions or anything like that. It means this is really a state of non-duality, where there's no subject object, so there's no place for a doubt to arise. Now in the next line, followers of the middling and lesser path cast reproach. Once again, that last character can be interpreted as strange, as shock. They're shocked, and it also means to blame. And I sense some tension in the lines. That's why I said cast reproach. And you'll see that's picked up in the next line. So they wonder if this hut is damaged. Now, what does that really mean? I mean, the hut, they're really talking about the metaphoric hut, the nature of his practice, the idea that he's following the Mahayana, and one assumes that the people who have these kind of doubts and they're really asking, is what it says literally, are people who can't break out of the early teachings. And remember, in the Lotus Sutra, when the Buddha is about to talk about the one great vehicle that encompasses all the older vehicles, 5,000 monks and lay people walk out on the Buddha. They just couldn't handle it. So these people, people who practice one path, people who don't practice, who don't understand what's going on, and have no aspiration, at least at this point. Remember, these things will always change according to the Lotus Sutra. They're wondering, so Shitou once again has this continual abiding, which can tolerate non-abiding, or the non-abiding which can tolerate abiding, however you want to look at it. The mind that is not arising can view and not be thrown off by the mind that is arising, by the deluded mind. So damaged or not, the original master, the true nature, still abides. And it actually says originally abides. So it's not even still, it's from beginningless time to endless ending, endless non-ending. There is this original master who is not going to be thrown off by the samsaric world. So dwelling not in north, south, east, or west. Once again, we're moving out of categories, just like we weren't seeing that it's not within, not without, not in between. whatever orientation you might be seeking, which is really kind of a natural thing when you read a poem like this. You're really looking for something to hold on to. And we're not getting it because he's not dwelling, he's non-locatable, like in the Manjushri Sutra, where they talk about Manjushri as not being able to be defined by any particular space. This is also reminiscent of Blue Cliff Record number 9, where a monk asked Jiaozhou, "What is Jiaozhou?" And Jiaozhou says, "North Gate, South Gate, East Gate, West Gate." Once again, this is a koan, which you can work on for quite a while, but I get the idea that he's accessible, he's there in every direction, but also not there and not there, and everywhere is what Jiaozhou is telling the monk, right? And one thing I should say that's interesting to think about in a poem like this is to ask the question why it was written in the first place. We're used to confronting, well, Western poems where someone had a vision, an experience, an emotional reaction, and then it comes out in a poem. Now, there are probably some of these very famous poems, Song in Mind and Inquiry into Matching Halves, which may or may not have had something like that in terms of their origination. But it also could be if a teacher is working with a student and the teacher sees that the student, very advanced student, is stuck somewhere. A poem like this might be showing them where they're stuck. So now we go to the unsurpassable foundation remains firm and fast. And as far as I can see, that is a pretty exact representation of Prajnaparamita, right? Bodhisattvas relying on Prajnaparamita have no obstructions in their mind. What is there to rely on? There is the utter solidity of Prajnaparamita, which has no solidity. It's resting in true nature. It is unsurpassable. It's the foundation of practice, and it remains firm, fast, solid, unshakable. Shitou is cluing us in on the dimensions, if you will, of how he now is in the world. Here's perhaps my favorite line in the poem. This, among the green pines, the window brightens what is within. This, as the last line I was saying, is a perfect representation of Prajnaparamita. This is a perfect representation of Samadhi. So below the green pines, and the Chinese is just wonderful. It's got bright there, window there, and then inside. And notice there's a certain thing, the translation I think is correct, but it's not accurate. So it's not that it's the brightness, right? Could be the moon, could be the sun, could be the essential nature is brightening with what's in. But this window is also a metaphor for our contemplative practice of looking within. And we'll see this as the poem continues. So, and this could be equated with perhaps the 9th of the ox herding pictures, where nature is simply presented as nature, with no ox herder in it before he's gone out to the market, which he will do in this poem, by the way. Now, this line, never facing jade palaces or vermilion towers. This is sometimes translated as jade palaces and vermilion towers cannot compare. That translation is correct as far as I can see, because this character Jue can mean compare. And this way could mean never. But I was also thinking in Heng Zhi, where he says Bu Dui Yuan or Jiao. So not opposing conditions and illuminating. So I don't see in a state of samadhi, if my interpretation is correct, that one is really doing a lot of comparison. I think that that's why I made it somewhat neutral, never facing jade palaces or vermilion towers, just the way he's not dwelling where the worldly dwell. He's not afraid of power and money, which is what this is really referring to. The machinery of government is really what this line is alluding to. He's not fazed by that. And then now we see seated in patched robe. This is a direct reference to Bodhidharma. And now, once again, the cinematographic nature of the poem is now narrowing in. Now we're actually seeing Shitou seated in patched robe, head covered, the 10,000 things at rest. What is at rest is his mind. 10,000 things are doing what the 10,000 things do in samsara, but he has a non-arising mind. So everything is at rest for him. And at this moment, and this moment once again is this moment right now in our Zoom, our Zoom meeting, right? Or it could be, let's say. The mountain monk doesn't encounter, now it says literally all not met, but so I expanded it to encounters no thing and no one. So he has no categories, like it said in the Lankavatara sutra that I quoted earlier. A person is a no person. A thing is a no thing. They're not how we usually think of things, how we usually encounter them. So his mind is aware, not missing a thing, but not bound up in ordinary categories. So now dwelling in this hut, he's sort of coming to another rest point. And then there's the word for rest, and the word for, it means to do, but it also means to fabricate. This is the way Jimmy Yu translated in the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment. And then understanding. So in a state like this, he doesn't have to make things up. He doesn't have to pretend to be anyone. And he also doesn't have to rely on conceptual understanding. This is all put to rest. This is a state, Patanjali would call it pratyahara, the state, where you're no longer relying on your senses. There's no intermediary between you and what there is. It's utter non-dualistic connection. Now his mind, Shitou's mind, sort of points a little bit outward and recognizing, it's really hard to say. There really were kind of teachers who competed with one another. There were teachings in schools that vied to see who was the best, who could collect the most people. So he's aware of that. He's aware of the world. And it's interesting, once again, I translated, here's the character person, which I translated as seekers, as it makes more sense in English. And the other character, this character means to buy. So it's almost like planning to go out and, entice people with some kind of, I don't know if they had coupons back then, but some sort of material, whatever, that would bring someone in so that someone not Shitou could boast about how many students they have. So Shitou is not in that state. He's not trying to be anyone who He isn't, and he's not trying to attract people for his ego, which is pretty much at rest now. And I have this here. This I left this in. This is the wheel of life and death. That's Yama, the god who conquered death. And this is the 12 links on the outside and all the different realms and good and bad karma. And it's posted in a lot of Tibetan monasteries to be understood as a mirror that you look in to see where you are. But I'm also put this here because the next part of the poem is now in the exhortation state. Now Shitou is going to be addressing us directly. Turn the light around, illuminate within, then come forth. I did a search on the internet for turn the light around, and there are well over 20 entries from Zen teachers. Of course, it's one thing when we even know that we have a light to turn around, that Gilbert is always saying this, that it's our true mind that is encountering the world, but we're not aware of that, but we can become aware of it. And when we become aware of it, we can start to turn the light around to see how the mind is working and to go within. There's a teaching of the bird path, the dark path, and extending the hands, which is kind of what these lines are alluding to. This real transformation could be the view level, the path level, and completion level. So, and once again, I translated this as come forth. It could be translated literally as return, but I wanted to give a sense that it's not definable from where the person is returning or coming forth. And then this is a line which is, I alluded to earlier in the talk, neither approach nor turn away from the spiritual source. And this spiritual source, you could take this as a direct reference to Buddha nature. But then, I think when you do that, you're then relying on old knowledge in a way. Maybe we don't know quite what spiritual source is. And, this is something we're trying to find out. And it is, we can understand from teachings and from our experience, it is who we really are. It is the Buddha within, and so you can't shake it, and you can't go somewhere. You can't drive across a river to get to it. It's always present, but it eludes our delusional awareness. So now he's continuing to exhort us. Meet the ancestral teachers. By practicing in the way that he's advocating in this poem, he's telling us, as sometimes many of our teachers tell us, that we can walk hand in hand with the Buddhas and intimately follow or heed what they say, their teachings, to really take the practice seriously. And now, this is like the first line in the poem, but now there's no person here. It's just tie grass, make a hut, and do not give rise to reluctance. Don't turn back. Keep going. Recognize this spiritual source is always with us. And now here's another line that I had quite a lot of soul searching or Buddha nature searching to translate. It literally says 100 years, throw it out, and then be unbound at ease. And when I first translated this, I went up to Rebecca Lee, I went up to Guoxing Fa, and I said, look, this is really what I think it's saying. And they okayed it, so I'm sticking with it. I think it's exactly what it's saying, but it's more identifiable with, if you will. So cast aside the life you think you have, be unbound and at ease. You, your fetters, the fetters of samsara, no longer hinder you. Swing your arms freely and walk blameless. Now, with craving gone, with ego subdued, there's no ego, there are no needs to satisfy where you could commit a transgression. And you don't have to attach to past ones. What will happen will happen. It's not like karma stops working, but we're, we can be free. And then last quatrain of the poem, 1,000 instructions, 10,000 interpretations. So this is pointing to Bodhidharma's teaching of Chan as being beyond words and languages, language beyond the sutras, pointing to the mind and showing the true nature. So you only get so far with words and spoken words and written words, and your understanding, your ordinary understanding, and then serve only to teach you to always stay clear of confusion. It's not like they're useless. We really get something from the teachings, but the actual practice has to be done by us in our own mind and our own body. No other thing can do it for us. And then last lines, the last couplet in the poem. If you wish to know the deathless one abiding in the hut, right? So that person, it's beyond flesh and blood, beyond spirit, right? Deathless, but abiding, not gone, not there either. So if you want to know that, then this is the really interesting last line. It's how can you possibly withdraw, or that can mean avoid or separate or distance. How can you distance yourself from this pidai, right? This skin bag. And that skin bag is not just noting the impermanence of the body, who's dragging this corpse around. That skin bag, I take it to mean all of our vexations, everything that makes us think it's a skin bag and not see that its connection to everything. When you talk about skin bag, you're really sort of isolated in yourself. So I want to bring attention to some very important, what I think is very important is that character Li. So I have one passage from the Lankavatara Sutra, right? This is chapter 30. I'll read the four things. This is the heart of the Lankavatara Sutra. Distinguishing appearances arising in mind, avoiding views of arising, dwelling, and cessation. I'll come back to that. Well perceive the non-essence of external phenomena and dedicate to personal realization of Buddha wisdom. But as you see here in this line, I have put Li in red. And I think this is really interesting. So this says, distance yourself. That's far and separate. Not destroy, not ignore, right? But distance yourself from views of arising, sustaining, and fading away. Meaning, that is everything that we know to be true about any physical phenomena, actually even ideas, all have an arising and an enduring and passing away. But those kinds of views are samsaric views. So the sutra is telling you to distance yourself from it. And the poem, using the same character, is telling you not to distance yourself, to look at everything, not to turn away from practice. Obviously, the whole poem is about practice, but even just who you are, how you are at this very moment. So this immanence and transcendence, absolute, relative, all of those are melted into one by the end of the poem. And now, one other thing I just want to show, another poem I could spend a lot of time, I'm just going to do this very briefly. This is The True Nature of Equality by Fu Dasher. And I'll read it very quickly. Working with a hoe, my hands empty. Riding an ox, I walk at leisure. Beings keep passing over the bridge. The bridge flows, the water does not. Now, I deliberately mistranslated this in a way because there is no my, there is no I, right? To show how people often translate it with that, but it really says empty hand takes up hoe, walking on foot, get up on water buffalo. People, you know, this could be we, you, mankind, humankind, sentient beings are crossing over the bridge. And now this is, so what I want to introduce as an idea is that that bridge is the same thing as the hut in the poem before. It's very close because the bridge is what is life we're passing through. Now, the people of the middling and the lower paths, when they cross over this bridge, as they do, as everyone does, as the bodhisattvas do, right? Because we're not leaving the world. When they look down, they see the water flowing and the bridge is solid. But Fu Dasher doesn't see that. He's not fooled by the appearances in mind. He sees that the nature of water is all pervasive, and of course by water, earth, air, fire as well. The bridge is impermanent. The bridge was not where it was some time ago, and in the future it won't be there. And as a matter of fact, there's just a poem here, so there's no bridge. There's just a word bridge. And just to finish up, I just thought I would read a Western poem, which is very powerful and points to just a little bit of what we're talking about. But I'm presenting this to show that words can have a certain power. We can be very aware of it. We don't want to get caught up in them, but we can learn a lot from words configured in a particular way. So this is a poem by Ellen Bass, and I actually found a tree that shows that's half growing and half dead. So there's impermanence in action. The poem is called If You Knew. What if you knew you'd be the last to touch someone? If you were taking tickets, for example, at the theater, tearing them, giving back the ragged stubs, you might take care to touch that palm, brush your fingertips along the lifeline's crease. When a man pulls his wheeled suitcase too slowly through the airport, when the car in front of me doesn't signal, when the clerk at the pharmacy won't say, "Thank you," I don't remember they're going to die. A friend told me she'd been with her aunt. They just had lunch, and the waiter, a young gay man with plum black eyes, joked as he served the coffee, kissed her aunt's powdered cheek when they left. Then they walked half a block, and her aunt dropped dead on the sidewalk. How close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack in heaven have to split? What would people look like if we could see them as they are, soaked in honey, stung and swollen, reckless, pinned against time? So that is it. Thank you all. Anyone who's still with me? Let me. So if anyone has any comments, any suggestions for a translation, any poems they'd like to oh, Santha, please.
Harry, this was amazing. It was just amazing. I loved your presentation. I love poetry, so I love the Dharma, so it was a um, double pleasure. Thank you.
Oh, well, thank you. Thank you. Yeah, Sam.
Hi, Harry. This was a pleasant surprise. I did not realize logging in I'd be hearing from you today, so this was awesome. I there's a lot to contemplate here, and thank you for taking the time to translate that Thatched Hut poem. That was incredible. Um, and I feel like the way you were able to explain it really gave a great perspective and a great doorway, in a sense, to actually approach that poem. But something I was thinking about was one of the first things, I think it was the first thing you touched on with Hanshan, was the recognize using poetry to essentially recognize the absurdity of both dreams and the real world or reality, and how they are both just have this absurdity to them. I thought that was very profound.
Yeah, I thought that was really wonderful in using the power of language and imagination, especially realizing, in the Sutra of Complete Enlightenment, one of the three methods of cultivation, there's samatha, dhyana, and there's samutpatti. Samutpatti is using the imagination to conquer the imagination. And, that's really operative in Vajrayana practice.
Mhm.
So
Yeah,
I'm glad you
I,
caught that.
that's funny you say that too, because it reminds me of there's another phrase I've heard from Ram Dass where he says, um, we use illusions, like methods, let's say, in the sense we use illusions to overcome illusion in that sense, or to transcend illusion. So I thought that was really cool. I thought that was great. Thank you, Harry. That was really awesome, and it's good to hear from you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Mei Li,
Hello, can you hear me?
yes.
Okay, okay, this is incredible synchronicity or resonance. I was introduced this point by my Chan teacher last month, and I was reading it in Chinese. But when I just first enter the Zoom and I saw the title, and then when I heard you, I don't know, just share with us with English and with the Chinese, and I was just so wow. And the actually I was so, how can I say, I just, it's like really special. So during your talk, I share actually with many of my artist groups about your this talk. So I don't know. I would also love to hear what they say about your talk. So this is the thing, and also the last
Yeah.
about the bridge and the water. That part. Wow, wow, it's quite a something. Yeah, thank you. Yeah, really appreciate it. Yes.
Okay. Well, glad. Sure. Thank you so much.
Yeah, thank you.
Santha,
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, just wanted to share, Harry, that
yeah,
the
thank
Sanskrit word bhavana is translated into gompa in Tibetan. Bhavana means becoming, cultivation, but it's becoming.
Uh-huh.
So it's very similar to the familiarization, if you will. Um, it's transforming in a way.
Yes. Um, I yes. Okay, I saw some things in the chat, but I'm not sure. I want to see if anyone has any other questions, poems to share, recipes for blueberry muffins. I'm curious if people were familiar with this poem before, or if this is the first time some of you are seeing it. Uh, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, okay. John,
Yeah, Harry, thank you. This was I had this first time I've heard this poem. It was beautifully presented, and you know, very very powerful. Your presentation about um, practice and impermanence and uh, acceptance, I think, of the way things are. So uh, really well done and very evocative. Thank you.
great. Well, thanks for coming.
Would you like to take the comments from the chat, Terry?
Take the what?
There are some comments in the chat.
Chat. Yeah. Let me see. Well, does non-duality have a state? Um, I think it's beyond a state. I don't think a state would be a definition, and non-duality was beyond definitions. Original abiding is our original face, who we really are. The non, the unborn. They often say the unborn, even in the Pali Sutras. That's the original abiding. It's also not that easy to define. And why does Shitou use I? I think he uses I to show that he's using his skin bag. He's practicing with his mind and body, with his normal mind and body. He hasn't left the world, but he's no longer weighted down by the world. And among the green pines shows mind, window, light is pervading. I would agree with that. That's our pure awareness being represented poetically, if you will. The light in that window is really coming from within. I'm not sure about the Jade Tower question. That line really is about a kind of contrast between Shitou non-abiding, if you will, in his hut, and his awareness of the structures of power and influence around him. And he's either noting how whatever power you have in those kind of situations is impermanent, it will fade away. Whereas what he is about will not fade away. And mountain monk is, that's just an epithet for the kind of practice he's doing. He's near the Nantai monastery, and I think in China there's some spot that people have found that they think is where his hut might have been. Of course, it's a long time ago, and if it was a grass hut, there wouldn't be a foundation. Prajnaparamita notwithstanding. So it's just an epithet for him being a monk, and notation of like that he's conducting a kind of solitary practice, I think. That's my, that's the best I can do with those questions. Oh, well, thank you, everyone. Oh, Jake, please.
Hi, Harry. Thank you. This is so interesting to hear you sort of think through these translations, and like explain like kind of the way that you go about this process of translating. There was one line, and I can't remember exactly what it was, but I think it was to the effect of putting aside this notion of life and body, I think, and you said you got approval from some people, I think, Washing Poche, to translate it the way that you did.
Yeah, yes.
What could you tell me what the actual like the kind of like literal translation you thought it would be and why you like
Yeah,
what liberty you took and
all
yeah.
right, so it literally says 100 years toss. I mean, Chinese is very condensed. Yeah, in other words, 100 years throw, meaning 100 years is an epithet in a lot of Chinese poetry for a human life, right? So it's sort of saying your samsaric life, whatever you happen to be doing, you've only got 100 years, right? And then poof, you're gone. And you're going to come back as a bunny rabbit or something if you're not lucky, or a god, who knows? But that's all you've got. And what Shitou is saying, forget about these pursuits, these worldly pursuits. That I think is what the 100 years means, literally. Forget about your life. That's why I said, forget the life you think you have, right? Because that part of the poem is really addressed to the reader. This is the exhortation part where he's really telling everyone to practice hard, don't turn back, have faith in mind. Just cast off this, your pursuits are not going to amount to anything. I mean, it's a pretty stark message, if you will. This is written by a monastic, for monastics. They're not nurturing, it's, that you have a job and you want to support your family and that sort of thing, which might be how we would react today in talking to someone about practice. This is a practice going all the way, not holding back, utter devotion, going beyond fear and attainment. I mean, it's why it's a remarkable poem. It's a remarkable practice that he had, and it's very inspiring, I think. I mean, it's not like many of us or any of us are in a position to to do something like that. But as one of my teachers says, not yet. You don't know what's going to happen to you, where you're going to be, and you might be in that position someday. Maybe not in this life, but the point is that it's really possible. It's really who we are. And we often have a mind of that's him, that's too difficult. Netflix has so many selections. If I watch enough reruns, maybe I'll live forever. Don't bet on it. Right?
Thank you.
Sure.
last call for questions and comments. Thank you, Harry, for a wonderful. Oh, there it is. We have a.
Wendy, okay, we have a taker. Yes, Wendy.
Thank you. So that's the one about the ant, like half a block drop dead. Can you explain that? I didn't understand.
Oh, okay, sure. Well, it's basically the name of the poem is If You Knew, right? So it's pointing out the fact that all these people who sometimes are meaningless to us or maybe meaningful, whatever their condition, they're going to die someday. And so the poem begins by saying, maybe you would take care to touch somebody's hand if you were taking tickets or you were brushing against them, because there's this human contact, right? I'm not talking Buddha Dharma so much. I'm talking about one's emotional life. And so she just gives this anecdote of a friend who was dining with her aunt. They had a lovely meal or something, and a waiter kissed her on the cheek, and it just so happened that the aunt dropped dead from a heart attack, one assumes, having just walked a half a block. And that's when the poem starts to say, you know, how close does the dragon's spume have to come? How wide does the crack of heaven have to open before we could see us as we really are? And it's got that interesting image of swollen, you know, with honey pinned against time, that basically we're impermanent. The physical shell that we're living in is going to depart from us, and we're going to depart from it. And this is, you know, in the Bhagavad Gita, Arjuna asked Krishna, what's the most amazing thing in the world? And Krishna says the most amazing thing in the world is that people see other people dying all around them, and they don't think it's going to happen to them. Right? So, you know, and you can't be told this enough in a certain way. You know, and there's this Mani, you would know this, Manasari Sati practice, the practice of aging and death, of being aware of your imminent aging and death. Manaskara Sati, something like that in Sanskrit, where, anyway, but you know, where there's a sutra where the Buddhist asked his
Jara Marana is
what?
aging and death.
Yes,
Jara.
Marana.
Yeah,
Yes,
okay.
that's it. Thank you. Asked his disciples, when do you contemplate death? And one says once a month, I make a practice of it. Another says once a week, and another one says once an hour. And finally, there's one who's aware of it every breath, every in-breath and every out-breath. And the Buddha says, you are correct. You know, there's that old question, what's it going to be, your next breath or your next life? Right? We don't know.
Thank you. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much, Harry. This is beautiful.
Yes.
Thank you so
Oh,
much
thank you.
for your
Thank you.
beautiful sharing presentation. Very touching.
Oh, well, good. Yeah, it's nice to share these things. We're all in it together. Right?
If you could share your translation, that'd be great.
Oh, I'd be happy to. Yeah.
On the forum.
Shall I send it to you?
Or just post it on the forum.
I'll post it on the forum. Okay. Yeah, I'll
Yes,
do that.
please.
Okay.
Thank you so much.
Okay. All right.